Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way is in Training. This is a podcast exploring how warriors should train and fight, as well as how they should live. We will talk about technique, but we'll also dive deep into fitness, mindset, and strategy. We will explore leadership and philosophy as well. So whether you are a young soldier, a veteran police officer, a responsible armed citizen, or simply someone looking for an authentic life, let's examine how the lessons of combat and preparation for it can help us fulfill our potential. Let's explore the way together and learn how the discipline of training can show us our true selves amidst the chaos of life. All right, everybody. In today's episode, I've got Cecil Burch of Immediate Action Combatives in here. Phenomenal reputation in the community as a trainer and a practitioner. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because just from what we were already talking about before we started the show, I think we're going to have a great time. So if you don't mind, Cecil, do me a favor and kind of let the listeners know a little bit about you if they don't already.
Sure. So I'm like that guy who always describes himself as the lifelong martial artist because that's true. I was kind of bullied as a kid. I have really severe asthma all my life, and I was a bookworm. So I got picked on in school. So as soon as I could, I'm like, I want to defend myself. So I stepped on the karate mats in 1980, and I haven't stopped since. At this point, I've trained in like everything, I always joke, pre-internet, we went by what was cool and black belt or Inside Kung Fu magazine. And I somehow figured a way, whatever was the cool art, whatever was said to be the deadliest art or the deadliest fighter, I usually found a way to train with either that person or like his number one or number two man. And so I've just kept that my whole life. I've not done any of the cool guy, law enforcement or military stuff. I haven't done any of that. I'm just average. I had a white collar professional job out of college until recently where I opened up a jiu-jitsu academy. But I've been training fighting for now going into 46 years of doing this. And I got instructor creds in a bunch of different systems, Filipino martial arts, Indonesian martial arts, a bunch of, modern eclectic street fighting systems. I started teaching in 1987 reluctantly. I didn't want to be a teacher, but my Jeet Kune Do instructor was like, no, you should do it. And he sold it to me as you'll never get as good doing something as when you teach it. So I'm like, you've given me a selfish reason to be a teacher because I didn't do this to teach. So I started doing it and he was right. I learned more, but then I found out I really loved teaching. I really loved the idea of passing on this knowledge to people and maybe keeping them from making the same mistakes I've made my entire life. And it's like, hey, do as Cecil says, not as Cecil did, because I made all these mistakes. So I've been teaching since 1987. I've got some real world stuff, but you don't talk about that kind of, I find it really kind of sketchy when somebody goes, I've had 400 street fights. It's like, oh, okay, you're a thug. And if there's not proof of something, you probably shouldn't talk about it, So I've done stuff in the real world, but it's not something that I discuss. I have competed a lot. I did a bunch of boxing smokers. That's why my nose looks like this way. I did a lot of judo because in the early days in 92, 93, 94, there was no jiu-jitsu competition. So that's all we did. And I've done a ton of jiu-jitsu competitions. And then I've been doing like roadshow, seminar, traveling gigs since 2007, I think. 2007, I think. So that's it. I mean, that's a long-winded way. I hate talking about myself, and now you make me do it too long.
No. That was good. And you said a couple things that really resonated with me there. Like I don't think you really, and this isn't about necessarily performance per se, because some people are really gifted and they're not that introspective about how they perform. They just kind of intuitively understand how to get there.
Yep.
But as far as understanding an art, I don't think you really understand it until you teach it. because people ask you things that you've never considered, you've never been introspective about, you've never thought about. And it never fails that, like, whenever I teach a class, I get something from someone that I can take back to make myself a little bit better. Right.
Yep. There's this weird thing that we have. I don't know if it's people. I'm going to say it's in the gun community, in the martial art community, but it might be just people. Is we tend to think of everything. We think of the macro, our micro, as the macro, like what we do, and it's not true. Like the way I think about something, or the way I have to practice a move, or the way I perform something. I might be the only person on the planet that does it, or there might be 10% of the people who do it my way, or who can do it my way. There's other people out there. It's like, wait a minute, they can't do it. And so you have to sit and think and go, whoa, wait a minute. This works for me in my context. What about them? And if you're going to be a good instructor, a true teacher, you got to meet them where they're at, not just go, hey, this is how we do it. This is the move. Right? The appeal to authority. Well, so-and-so grandmaster does this, or whatever. No, what works for that guy? And so you got to learn truly the art, that's cool, right? Because like I'm not a triangle choke guy. It's just not been my thing. But you know what? I'm really good at teaching the triangle. Because I've thought about it, and it's like, okay, I can vaguely make it work for myself, but I'm just big bag of, athletic fail my entire life. I always joke I was the kid picked last in dodgeball and PE, which is true. But if I can make something vaguely work for myself, then a lot of other people are going to be able to get something from it. As opposed to, like you said, that guy who's just the phenom, the physical freak who just, he sees this move and does it. But then you ask him, well, how do you do it? Just do it. Well, that's not quite the same thing.
Yeah, no, and I think, like, here's a trap that I first discovered through martial arts, and then I fell into the same trap again in shooting. You think I would have learned the first time, right? Is we imitate someone else's technical appearance, how their technique looks, thinking that if we just make ours look like theirs, we'll make it work like theirs. And that's not always the case. Yep. Like the example I use in shooting is grip, right? Like no two top shooters have a grip that look exactly alike because their hands are different. Their psychology is different. Their body styles are different. The gun they're shooting is different. The principles are the same, but if you just imitate their grip, you're not necessarily going to get the same results they do. And same thing in martial arts, right? Because I started in karate too. And I was young. I was like really young, right? So for me, I was thinking form equaled function. I made it look like, Hirokazu Kanazawa or like Tanaka or like Mikami. If I made it look like them, it would work like them, right? No, it did not.
Well, you're right. We copy, we ate the shell, and hopefully we end up getting the structure from that. But they're not necessarily the same thing.
Yep. And
that's why you see so many people, especially in martial arts, fail in the beginning because the teacher's not very good, and he's just going, do this move, do it like this. Well, I'm having problems. We'll keep doing it that way. That's just aping the shell. Like you said, you talk to some GM about their grip. Hey, I do it this way, and I have 20 pounds of pressure like this, and I'm gripping like this, and this pinky is really important. Awesome. I try to copy that. Maybe my physiology doesn't work quite that way, right? So you got to figure out, okay, yeah, we have to teach technique, right? We have to teach the shell on stuff, but it's got to be informed by function, not just form.
I think all too often we confuse the medium for the message.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And like going back to martial arts, like traditional martial arts, right? Like everybody, there's some phenomenal techniques in the traditional arts, but a lot of people can't make them work because they're confusing the medium with the message.
Yep.
They're confusing the transmission device to teach you the technique with how the technique actually works. They're confusing the form with the application, and they're just not the same thing.
Well, you were just talking with Brian Eastridge on
Yeah.
the show about taking a picture of Jack Weaver, right? And
Yeah.
everyone's like, "Here's the Weaver stance." Is it? Is that the Weaver stance you learned in 1992? Is that really the stand? Is that really what he did, or is that what you think he's doing?
Yeah, and it's the game of telephone too, right? It's this guy learned it from Weaver, then he taught it to somebody else, and he taught it to somebody else, and because they didn't really understand what was making it work for Weaver, probably. And I'm not knocking anybody, but it just seems like that was the case. Each transmission lost some of the message while maintaining some of the medium.
Yeah, and I think that's exacerbated because nobody ever teaches you how to teach, right?
Yeah.
In shooting or martial arts is traditionally like, okay, you have achieved a certain level. You are now badass fighter, and you know all the system. Cool, go and teach. Well, how are you going to teach? You're going to teach how you've been taught. And if that way of teaching is not great, and you're missing a lot of the nuance and the little, well, if this, then that, but maybe this kind of thing. And now, like you said, now it's the game of telephone. So you're not understanding, you're passing on what you don't understand, and you're not a good teacher. Holy moly, how is the student going to suddenly surpass you? How is the next generation going to surpass? No, it's actually
it's going to degrade. Yeah, it's going to degrade
exactly.
over time.
And I think you see that with a lot of classical martial arts.
Yeah.
I was really heavy into a lot of the Chinese systems. I was fortunate for a good chunk of the early 90s training with a guy named Jin Hong Lee, who used to be assistant coach with the Beijing Wushu team.
Oh, cool.
And then he emigrated. Well, the thing that people don't understand, that's a full-time gig. Like when you're a coach doing that, that's all he did was martial arts. So he's training with all these old school guys, small Wu style Tai Chi, Baji Chuan, Shuai Jiao, all these things he's doing. And so he's passing on this stuff to me. And the problem becomes that you look at these things and you go, oh, where, like Baji Chuan, I really dug Baji Chuan. And you can see where maybe in the 1800s, that was a really good fighting system. But now, 1990, people are just, oh, here's the form. You're not really seeing, well, how do you punch somebody really hard with this? How do you hit a moving target? Well, that's not part of it because it somehow got watered down. But when they came up with the system, the first originators and his first students, they were beating the hell out of people because that's the only way the art would ever have established itself.
Yeah.
But you see that watered down. So then you get, I know, I was just talking about this. I saw an article on the South Korean Marines in Vietnam. I put it online. It was a really interesting article about how badass they were. And I knew this. One of my original instructors had served in Vietnam, and he trained alongside the Marines, and he spent a couple years after Vietnam in Korea training hardcore Taekwondo. And the stuff that he saw as Taekwondo is not what most people see as Taekwondo, where it's this kick, flippy. It looked more like Thai boxing than what we think of. Well, where's the disconnect? Well, because now you got 3-4 generations of people just teaching in a shopping mall, and they're making money. Well, it's watered down, and it loses. So I always, everyone goes, oh, that's not a good fighting art. Oh, stupid. Who has time for Taekwondo? Who has time for Shotokan? It's like, maybe now, but that doesn't mean that it was not a massively functional fighting system 50, 100, 200, 300 years ago.
And I think part of the problem, and this is one of those things that's nuanced, right? So before I get fucking lambasted in the comments on YouTube, I'm going to articulate this a little bit. So I think that some sort of non-cooperative competition is absolutely vital for your development as a fighter. 100% vital, right? Yep. But just like the medium and the message being confused with other training tools,
a lot of that depends on the rules that are put in place to make the competition safe and manageable.
Mm-hmm.
To make it scoreable and to make it safe for the competitors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that's a lot of what happened to Taekwondo. It's a lot of what happened to Shotokan. It's a lot of what happened to a lot of these arts, is that competition became a big part of the art, which in and of itself can be a great thing. Like, you need that competition because you need somebody who's trying to stop your technique from working and you try to make it work.
Yep.
But then whatever rules are in place sometimes water the art down over time based on the demands and the way the competition's judged and the rule set and all of that. And I think that's something that needs to be watched out for, especially in a lot of like the arts like we're talking about,
Yeah, 100%. We're seeing it. I think we see it both on the shooting side and all of them. USPSA, IDPA, I don't care what anybody wants to say is like it's the most street functional.
It's still a game.
It's still a game. Jiu-jitsu is the same, has become the same exact way. And I am not one of those, oh, you don't do competition. I love competition jiu-jitsu because it propels the art. It pushes the boundaries of the art, just like hardcore open division USPSA stuff. It pushes us to know what is possible. And then, all right, do we need quite the ragged end? No, but right before that, we can use that in the real world. Same with jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of moves coming out of competition jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of strategies that you would never use in any circumstances. But there's still those things where you're like, oh, but look what happens if this, we can do this if it ever comes up. And look at the training methodology we can do. We can put tons of time into this without killing each other. So you have that. So the competition's great, like you said, but there's nothing that simulates fighting. I'm sorry. We can't perfectly simulate fighting. We can go, all right, I'm going to give you a Sims gun. I have a Sims gun, and we go at it. No, but I'm not trying to kill you. The Sims gun, you know that if I light you up and hit you 10 times with a Sims gun, you're not going to die.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to gouge your eyes out. I'm not going to smash my elbow into your throat. There's nothing that we can there's no such thing, the fight like you train. Shut the F up.
I hate that phrase. I hate that so much because like look at it this way, right? Is there a single football team that does nothing but put on the pads and scrimmage for every practice, all practice long? No. Is there any top MMA fighter that does nothing but spar full contact? No.
Nope.
But that would be training like you fight. People have to train for the fight, not like you fight.
Yeah. I mean, we can all agree that strength and conditioning is an important thing if you want to be a top-notch operator, fighter, or whatever. Oh, okay, cool. So, Mr. SEAL guy, you're going to go full-on kit, and you're going to lift 400 pounds in your deadlift in the gym in full gear with a M4 strapped across your back? No, you're not. Yeah. But that's fighting, right? Yeah. It's people need to see train like you fight. Train like you fight is like slow as fast, whatever it was, slow as fast.
Slow as smooth and smooth as fast.
Yeah. That's 100% true. But that doesn't mean that that's the sum of what it means. It's just this very thin line of like, train like you fight. Okay, at some point, we've got to go as realistic as we can to make sure that our gear works, that our techniques work, that our training methodology works. Slow as smooth. Okay, when you first learn a physical technique, you've got to go slow. You've got to make sure the mechanics are grooved in. Then, once they're grooved in, now push it.
Yep.
Right? Put the hammer down on it. So it's these things, and the training community, martial arts side and gun side, we love our pithy phrases. We love, because it looks good on the grams, right? But God, we're talking about fighting, which is, there's so much nuance in everything, and we lose it because, oh, I'm cool. They all follow the hardball. Shut up. Stop with the pithy phrases.
Yeah, and they have the buzzwords and the popular phrases have no room for nuance. And I think it frustrates a lot of people at a certain level of experience for any of this stuff, right? Anything that involves conflict.
Yeah.
To not be able to find a one-size-fits-all solution for a particular question. But, usually the answer starts off with, it depends.
Exactly. And now let's go into your context. What's the contextual things that we need to talk about to then come up with an answer for that? And it may be the same technique, right? Okay. This escape from mount. Okay. All right. If you're equal weight you're equal size to their guy. Okay. We can do it kind of like this. Oh, wait, he's much bigger than you and you're injured. Okay, well, now we have to do this, right? It's even one technique might have, or a specific thing might have that nuance. And instead of just going, hey, here's my cool guy thing, listen to me because I'm awesome.
You just kind of brought me around to something I was thinking about a few minutes ago that I kind of want to get into combo here. We were talking about imitating techniques, right?
Mm.
And this is something that I realized in the martial arts world, like was actually like classical, like, Japanese jiu-jitsu stuff, like not BJJ, but the old school stuff.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
And we had a teacher who was very, very upright when he applied his locks. He's basically like in a knee on chest or a mount position, doing an arm bar, doing, Sankyo or whatever. And like extremely erect and upright, So a lot of us, after training with him at the seminar, decided, that was like the way it had to be done. And we're like all extremely upright. And then somebody who was senior to me goes, he's got a bad back, right? That particular nuance in the technique had nothing to do with what made the technique effective. It was what he had to do to get around an injury.
Exactly.
And we fall into the trap of imitating something that is a workaround for other people. Like I have nerve damage in my right hand, right, from the Army. I got messed up pretty bad. So when I shoot two-handed with a pistol, I cam in and up because I can't feel this part of my hand right here, right? It's got no sensation. So that act of camming in helps me feel the pressure on these fingers and make sure my grip is appropriately strong and in the right place. Because I can feel pressure, but I can't feel touch with those fingers.
Yeah.
So that camming in could be totally unnecessary for someone else. So if I explain what I do in my grip without giving the context of it, they could imitate that when they don't need to, when it's not necessary for them, when it's superfluous. I have to do it as a workaround.
Right.
And I've seen that with enough, different, because everybody by the time they get to a certain age is broken at some point, right? So all the senior guys in all these disciplines, whether you're talking the military or martial arts or, law enforcement trainers or any of it, we've all got injuries by a certain point in our life that aren't really going to go away.
Yep.
So you run the risk of imitating something that somebody is doing to compensate for a deficiency.
Yep. And it's so funny. We never talk about that in the training community, right? We all go around teaching, talking, and acting as if we're always going to be 100% mental, physical, and emotionally ready to go at all times. It's like, that's not true. That's especially you start to get like north of 40, right?
Yeah.
Every 5 years, there's a big step down. I don't care I don't care what a physical god you are. Your body is going to drop. Now, maybe if you're elite level or whatever, and it doesn't drop as much, but there's a reason Michael Jordan is still not playing in the NBA. There's a reason Mike Tyson is not still boxing. He's still better than 99.9% of the human race, but he's not as good as he was 20 years ago. It's just, and if you don't make that part of the conversation as a teacher, man, we're doing a huge disservice to our students, because then you have to say, okay, this technique is really good. Okay, here's the way I like to shoot. Everything's like this is perfect, but I have to do this because of X. So your student needs to know that kind of stuff. And then they go, oh, okay, well, does that apply to me or not? Or it may apply to, it doesn't apply to me now because I'm 25. But in 15 years, I might have to do that exact thing.
And I think also the conversation's valuable. And like you said, I don't think we talk about it enough, right? But it's valuable because, my student may not need the same workaround for the same pre-existing condition that I do, or the same deficiency, because we all have talents and we all have our weak points, right? No matter how good an athlete you are, every athlete has, what's the term for it in coaching? Is it holes? It's something where they talk about, this space that's missing in their physical preparedness, that it's where they're weak. It's where they have a limitation, not always from injury. And, even the best athletes in the world have those, right? And they've got to learn to compensate for them. So just the idea of getting that thought out there and having people think about that, because everybody's got something they have to compensate for, even if it's not an injury. Everybody has their thing that is not as good as the rest of their attributes, their physiology, their ability, their skill. How do you compensate for that? How do you develop the workaround to still get to a certain level of skill?
Yep. And yeah, we want to teach. Here's what we found best practices right now. This is the best way to draw a gun. Here's our best grip. Here's the best way to clear a cover garment. Here's the best way to throw a punch. Here's the best way to hold double underhooks. We want to have that as here's what we know is the best. But if something happens, here's a workaround. Here's a workaround. Here's a workaround. Maybe it's not going to be quite as effective, but it's still okay. I have a student. She is 67. She's 67. She's about 5'4", 67. Never done anything really athletic. Started doing jiu-jitsu. What am I going to tell her? That she has to fight exactly the way that 25-year-old purple belt, who is 180, 190 pound dude who's in perfect shape and is training all the time? No, it's completely different. They're learning the same techniques. There's going to be some adjustment. And is she going to be quite as effective as he in a fight? No, but that's not the standard. The standard is, can you be better than you were yesterday, right? Kaizen, right? Can you be 1/10 of 1% better today than you were yesterday? Or not even 1/10 of 1/100th of 1%. But every day you're better, you're better, you're better. And it's like, okay, I'm never going to be a triangle choke guy. That's just not my thing. I can do it once in a guy. I hit it a couple of weeks ago in sparring, and I was ready to leave the mat going, yeah, I'm done. I'm out of here, because I don't hit it. But I have a vague idea how to do it. I understand it, and it's there. It's somewhere possible for me to do it. Well, that's fine. Not like you said, not everybody's doing everything the same equally. We're all going to be different. We just have to find that for ourselves.
And I think there's benefit in this way of thinking too, that just occurred to me, is how many times have you seen someone, and I've been guilty of it, you're grappling with someone and you have this idea of this is the technique that is appropriate for right now. And you stick with that no matter what happens right after.
Oh,
I'm going to make this work. When you'd be better off like, okay, I need to abandon this and do something else because things just changed. Or I need to use a less optimal version of the technique because something just changed, instead of trying to make it perfect, right? Yep. Or like going back to shooting, like how many times, this is a beginner's mistake. It's not more advanced shooters, but how many times do beginners mess up their shot by trying to make the sights perfect when they yank on the trigger?
Yep.
It's perfect, so I'm going to go now, right?
Yep.
It's kind of the same. That's the same mental error, I think, is what we're talking about with fighting techniques, with hands-on techniques.
Yep.
Is trying to make the technique perfect instead of just trying to make it work.
Yep. I'll give you an example of me in shooting. So I'm a fighter, right? 45 plus years fighting. I'm used to throwing around guys, 50, 100 pounds bigger than me. I'm not a weakling, right? So when I get a gun up, especially like a 9mm or something, and I'm shooting, I have this, I know I do, and it's something I work on. I have this mindset of this thing is not going to move. There's no way. It's this little gun with this little boop, 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 124 grain ball ammo. This thing isn't going to move. And so what happens, I start sometimes to get that extra drive. So right as the gun goes off, I'm doing this extra. It's not a flinch. I'm not it's no pre-ignition flinch. It's me. This thing is never going to move because I'm so strong. Well, now I've just messed up my trigger press because I'm trying, like you just said, I'm trying to make my recoil control perfect in that moment. And I know, and I fight it. When I'm on point, it doesn't happen. But, you're going, and you're 100 rounds into your training session, and it's like, this thing, I'm going to beat this gun, and then it happens. And then I get really ticked off.
The way that manifested for me wasn't in not getting a good shot. It was being overly tense, trying to do that, and then having it slow down my splits and my transitions because I'm being overly tense.
Yeah.
And that's been a big struggle of mine. And I've only recently really learned how to just kind of relax behind the gun.
Yeah.
And understand that it's okay if the gun moves, as long as it comes right back to where it was, it's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that's a hard thing, I think, especially for us as fighters. Because I'm not letting the other guy do what he wants to do, right?
Yeah.
Everything, I'm imposing my control on him. I'm minimizing his control on me. Well, sometimes, and this is true in jiu-jitsu, right? Sometimes let him do what he wants, and I'll just take this is something that Hiron Gracie said a while ago, and it was super. It's been my mantra since. He goes, "You don't get what you want in jiu-jitsu. You get what they give you." And it's like, yes. Now there's a pithy phrase that actually makes sense. It's like,
it's so simple, but it's so true, and it applies to everything. And my personality type was always like, I tried to just bend the universe to my will,
absolutely,
force reality to roll over and tap, right? But that's not the way reality works, and you get a lot further,
especially as you get older. Yeah.
And I think you get a lot better results by kind of allowing the right things to happen. Being more zen about it, or as the Chinese artists, being more Tao about it, just allowing it to happen.
Well, we were talking about Musashi. I actually am more fascinated with his last couple writings than I am with the Book of Five Rings. And nobody, everyone's like, yeah, whatever. Book of Five Rings, yeah, great stuff, awesome. But it's those last, especially the one he wrote the week he died.
Yeah,
there's a summation, and there's a lot of that underlying thought in what he's talking about. You're just kind of there, and you just respond. It's just, hey, this is how everything is. And it's like, oh yeah.
Have you read Kinji Tokitsu's book, Musashi: His Life and Writings?
Yes.
It's got everything he wrote. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's it. That was the one where I really, because I had read a couple of the other things, but that was the book that put it all together in that, where you could see the progress of his thoughts.
Yeah, and especially because he started out, we were talking about thugs earlier. He basically started out as a thug.
Oh, absolutely. He was what you would consider a gangbang thug when he was like 13 years old.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he grew into being this well-rounded kind of, I hate to use here's a pithy word, but I'm going to use it, kind of an enlightened soul by the end, he really did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's a really interesting journey, because now he's done all this. He's killed these people. He's fought all these duels. He's been in war. He's taught a lot of people. And where he comes down to is just what you said earlier. Just kind of go with what the universe gives you. Just don't bend it to your will. Just kind of move around like, you're flowing around and let it happen. And okay, I'll go this way instead of going head on to it. I wish I'd have known this when I was 25.
Yeah, me too. But I think it's hard to know that when you're a certain kind of person and you're 25.
I always think about.
I certainly don't think Musashi knew it at 25.
Oh, and I always think about, what if I had a time machine and I could go back to 1988, right after I graduated college, and go, all right, Cecil, here's the mistakes you're about to make. Okay, don't punch brick walls without hand wraps and pads, because there's no pads and hand wraps in the street. Stupid, right? So both my the supporting ligaments on both wrists are completely severed from doing that kind of dumb stuff.
Yeah.
my elbows, both elbows are jacked up. This shoulder is shot. Both knees are completely shot. I know I have CTE because back then, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, a concussion was only if you were unconscious.
Yeah.
That those knees I took to the face, the elbows, all the punching and sparring and stuff. No. Just because it rung my bell, just because Tweety Bird's floating around. No. That's nothing. And I'm like, man, if I go back and tell myself, here's the things to watch out for and not do it, that 21-year-old guy would go, get the hell out of here, old man. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm so much smarter than you. And, I think you're going to repeat the cycle. But hopefully, you and I are at the point where now we can try to get the message out. And maybe there's some younger guy smarter than us who'll go, well, maybe I should pay attention a little bit to doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I wish, if I could give my younger self just one thing, it would be to maintain my body better.
Yeah.
Not just train it, but to maintain it better, to do maintenance on it.
Yep.
Especially and to be a little more wise about my training techniques.
Because we know now with the science and stuff, we know what our vulnerabilities are as we get older. It's don't have an orthopedic injury once you get north of 60. Maintain as much muscle mass within reason. Don't be 300 pounds walking around, but have good muscle mass north of 60. All those things are much better. Well, can you do that and still train functionally for fighting? Sure. You just have to be a teeny bit smarter. Maybe I didn't need that marathon 3-hour session of hitting Thai pads, hitting the heavy bag, hitting focus mitts, and sparring day after day after day. Maybe I could have minimized it a little bit, things like that so my body is not suffering. I mean, I hurt every day in some way.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about break falls in the alley behind the dojo and late at night after drinking.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. My jiu-jitsu professor, he was very much old school, comes from old school days where everything's a fight. And we would go out at times because, that the especially then, 93, 94, it's like, well, you can't roll around and do that stuff when you're not on the mats. So Meg would go, all right, we'll show them. So we'd go out to the gravel parking lot and train for an hour. We'd do all the same stuff, including throws, all that stuff. And it's like, okay, it was good. I mean, there was some benefit to it, but maybe we could have been slightly smarter about how we did, and maybe didn't have to take as much of that pounding on our bodies. But that's what you did. That's what you did, because we're martial artists. That's what you do.
And to be honest too, because I think about this a lot, and I mean, do I hope that the things I tell the younger versions of me have a positive effect on what they do? Absolutely. But I got to be honest too, that even though it would have been nice if I'd been a little smarter about things, in the broad general terms, there's not a lot of change.
No,
training techniques, yes, but the experiences and the stuff, even that it's left me with injuries and everything else, it was worth it to me. Now, having said that, I think there's smarter ways to do it and do the same things. So that's the one thing I would change, to be a bit smarter about it.
Yeah,
but I'd still do all the same stuff, to just be smarter about it.
And I do think that there is some value to some of the dumb stuff we did, because it does infuse us mentally and emotionally. It's at that core, right? So I'm 60 now. I'll go and roll with somebody. I was at a big jiu-jitsu event October. I was in October, and we're going to roll, and this is not an exaggeration. This is a brown belt, probably in his late 20s, so whatever, 30 plus years younger than me, about 340 plus pounds, about 6'6". And he goes, "You want to roll?" I go, "Yeah, let's go." and he tries to literally pop my head off like a Pez dispenser or something. I was like, oh, we rolled. It was fine. But I'm not afraid of rolling with anybody because of all the 32 years of jiu-jitsu and the 45 years of martial arts that came before that, because I've already been through that. And so it is kind of nice to go, hey, you might beat me. You might tap me. You might knock me out. Cool. But you know what? You're not going to destroy me. You're not going to humiliate me. I'm not a pushover. And it comes from all that kind of stuff. So I'm with you. I would have liked to have been slightly smarter about some, especially the CTE, the head damage. I would have heard about that. But the rest is like, yeah, you know what? And here's the other thing. I think it allows us to speak with more authority to the younger guys.
Yeah,
because,
no, definitely.
Like, look at where we are now. I'm still on the mats. You're still out there doing this stuff. We're still shooting. We're still competing. We're still doing all this stuff. I'm just telling you that maybe we got to watch some of this. So it's not like we're the 350 pounds, with the chi in our belly martial artists sitting on the side. Hey, back in my day, we did this. Well, they're not going to listen to us, but we're still doing it. We're still there. So I think we come across as a little bit more gravitas when we tell that 25-year-old, hey, dude, maybe wrap your hands when you're hitting the heavy back. Just a thought.
So talking about wrapping your hands or hitting brick walls, right? I had read something on Oyama and how he would like pick a tree in the woods and just punch the tree. And every time we go into the field, I'd find a tree and just punch on the tree. Probably not the smartest thing to do, when I was in the Army, right? But it's like you read this stuff and you don't think about the fact that despite their achievements and despite the larger than life stature of some of these guys, maybe they didn't always have the best idea when they were younger either.
And what we tend to forget is some of them died a little bit earlier than they should have. You're like, I wonder if there's a correlation between this master dying at age 50 and not in a duel, but a little early and his training methodology. Something to think about.
Well, Musashi went at 60.
Yeah. Which, okay.
I mean, he had cancer. They said he had cancer. So I don't know how they know that, but.
Yeah, it's weird, right? You think about that. Like, how did you know that kind of stuff? What did you?
It's probably some historian's hypothesis, I would imagine. Based on the symptoms he had or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's a funny one, because everybody talks about Musashi living in Rigindo, right? Living in the cave.
Uh-huh.
Have you seen pictures of Rigindo?
Uh-huh.
It's a house.
It is.
He was not dumb. He wasn't living in a cold, damp, wet cave at 60 when he was sick.
Right. And that house, that was what he lived in. It's not like they built this after the fact to honor him. No, they kept it in the exact same shape he did his retreat in. And you're looking at it, you're like,
oh, that makes sense. Yeah, he was not a fool. Yeah, this is totally different. Yeah,
this is like the rich dude who has the mountain home on the side of some giant mountain in Colorado. That's what he was at.
Yeah.
Not, I'm a hermit and I have a log fire going. No, you don't.
No, he had a fireplace.
Yeah, everything. And servants brought his food. He wasn't going out and doing any of this stuff.
No, he was, I forget which lord he was the guest of.
Yeah.
The air quotes guest,
Right.
But whoever it was providing for him in his old age, which is, there's nothing wrong with it. Actually, if anything, it shows he's smarter than people give him credit for.
And he deserves it. He deserves it. That. And what he left us he certainly deserved it. But it's just this thing where the image from movies and like TV is of the aesthetic martial artist who this is what he's doing. It's like, no, that's not quite true. I mean, you look at like Yagyu Munenori, right? The life-giving sword, right? He served his whole life as retainer to the shogun.
Yeah.
What kind of luxury are you living in? And your kids, who now become the sword teachers to the following shogun, they're basically living as the upper echelon.
Well, and you can make an argument too that especially in those eras, right, whether you're talking Europe or Japan, the only way to get really good was to have that kind of disposable income typically.
Yeah.
Because you had to have the ability to train all day.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it was either that or do like Masashi did when he was young and just go basically then he really was a hermit when he was young, living out in the woods.
Right, exactly. Those early years when he first started doing all his
Yeah.
duels, he was that. But that's from, in his teens and through his 20s.
Yeah. Yeah. After that, it was not the same.
Yeah. People forget he was a painter, a
And a
calligrapher,
sculptor.
a sculptor, all that kind of stuff. Well, where's he doing that? He's not doing that out in the woods.
No.
He's doing all this in luxury and stuff like that. So martial art, it's good. We could have certain stringent, hard training stuff, but let's be realistic about everything else that surrounds it. We don't have to just devote our lives entirely to that kind of thing to the exclusion of all else.
And I would argue too, and once again, this is one of those things that's kind of, there's some nuance here too, right? There's two sides to this. Because I don't think you really develop mastery of any craft without being a little bit obsessive about it, right?
Oh,
like
sure,
you can't really be, you can't have what most people would consider to be a truly healthy balance in your life and be the best at anything.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Having said that, I don't think that has to be a lifelong condition.
Yeah.
You know, like at a certain point, it's time to start doing like Masashi did and start writing and doing art and learning culture and all these other things that you neglected because you were so busy working on being the best you could be at what you did.
Right. 100%. Okay. All right. You're tier 1 spec ops guy. You go in the military at 18, whatever, and you're going to go 10 years. Cool. You're doing nothing but training and doing all that fighting. Awesome. Come out. Let's say you want it, you love that lifestyle and you love all about it. So you can keep doing it, but you don't have to have 10, 12 hours a day, every 7 days a week of doing it. You can now put an hour here and 20 minutes here and 5 minutes on this day because you were on vacation with your wife and kids and you did 5 minutes of dry fire with your SIRT pistol, like while they were at the pool at the hotel or something. It doesn't have to be that.
And the other thing too that I think people need to realize is, and this kind of ties into what we're talking about, I think, maintenance of a skill set is far easier than developing the skill set. Maintenance of a physical attribute is far easier than developing the physical attribute, right? It doesn't take the same amount of time in the gym to stay in shape as it took to get into shape. It doesn't take the same amount of training time to maintain a skill as it took to learn the skill.
But it still requires time. And that's what I think that's where a lot of the discussion, again, we're going back to the idea of nuance and lacking the training community, right? Okay. You want to build a sub-second draw from concealment. Awesome. It's going to take a lot of work. I don't care what anybody says. I'm sorry. And I'm very good friends with a lot of people who teach that stuff. It still is a hard skill to learn. It takes a lot of time to develop. Cool. But it's going to take, not like you said, not as much time to maintain, but you're still going to have to maintain it. Because, okay, let's say you were that guy. You got a 0.98 draw from concealment, cold, on demand, time after time after time. But now you go 2 months where you're not really practicing. You don't have a 0.98. You're lucky if you got a 0.13, 0.14 at that point.
Yep.
It's just, there is this idea that you have to have both ends. Okay, train, maintain. But the nuance that people are missing is, like you said, work really hard to get there. And then just devote a little bit of time to maintenance. And especially where this comes in, because like I've been, this advocate for, 25 years online, longer actually, because I go back to AOL folders and CompuServe and Prodigy boards, right? That I've been doing. So like 30 years publicly talking about advocating for this idea, this interdisciplinary approach, hand-to-hand, firearms, impact weapons, knives, strength and conditioning, pre-fight threat, all that kind of stuff. And people go, oh, but it's so hard to train. You got all this stuff and you got to do all this. I don't have the time in the day. Well, yeah, you're not doing all of it every single day. Build the skill set. Focus on, all right, I'm going to do a block of training for 8 weeks. I'm going to really go hardcore on my shooting. And then maybe for 2 hours a week over the rest of the week, I'm going to do some strength and conditioning, and I'm going to get some hitting the heavy bag in. So there's that minor little maintenance, but I go hard here. Cool. Once I get this level, now I shift. Maybe my next 8-week block is, I don't know, my strength, my cardio. I'm going to bring that up. And now I maintain my shooting. That's where we have to put the thought and effort into we know how to build the skill. That's not hard. We know how to build the skill. It's not 10,000 hours, but there's some work.
Yeah.
But now let's figure out what maintenance and how we do this in a real world with, wife. I have 2 kids. I have 2 grandkids. I like being around them. I like doing stuff. I like going to dinner with my wife. I like traveling. I like seeing different places. Doesn't mean I still can't maintain. It still doesn't mean I can't do some solo jujitsu movement when I'm in the hotel. It doesn't mean that I'm not doing the other things. Okay. But let's be realistic. Just don't be lazy about it.
I think too that, and this is specifically about combative things, whether you're talking shooting or martial arts or all that, right? Like I used to joke when I was younger, when I was in my 30s, that I was looking for the unified field theory of conflict. And I really think, and this is something that it's a concept that's kind of like near and dear to me, right? Because I did put a lot of thought into this. At a principle level, all human conflict is the same. At a principle level, like the overarching principles. Because it's all about imposing your will on someone else through the use of some sort of force. And by force, it could just be social pressure.
Yep.
It could be, debate. Like we're just talking all conflict, whether it's, verbal, physical, everything from, debating about a discount at the grocery store with the clerk that you're supposed to have, all the way up to thermonuclear warfare, right? The principles are all the same. And what changes is the application based on the environment, the rules of engagement, whatever social strictures there are, and that can include legalities, you know what I mean?
Yep.
But the cool thing about that is I think if you spend a significant amount of time, is back to, we were talking about this before we turned on the recording about how Masashi said, from one way, no always. And what he didn't mean was being good at one thing would mean you were good at everything else. What he meant was that if you could learn one thing, you knew how to learn everything else.
You knew how to learn whatever you needed to do from that point on.
Yep. And so lately, I've been kind of doing a little bit of a dive into like European stuff, like the Italian and German sword treatises and stuff like that. Yeah. Not because I'm ever going to take a long sword and swing it around in the real world. But what is fascinating to me is how many technical parallels, not just strategic or doctrinal parallels, but actual technical parallels I find between that and the Japanese sword stuff I did, how much of it is actually very similar. The differences are based more on technology, clothing, and society than they are on the actual technique, right?
Yep.
And then if you dive deeper into it, you find parallels to shooting, particularly not so much competition shooting as much as gunfighting.
The mindset beforehand and the beginning stuff is identical.
Yep. And then even like, because, you're dealing with basically a yard-long razor, right? Like blocking was not as much of a thing as people think.
Yep.
Redirecting and avoiding and taking a particular position that was advantageous. What does that sound like? Sounds like gunfighting. I mean, there are differences, obviously. It's not the same. But if you look at what makes it work, you can find so many parallels that I think reading those treatises is making me better at the other things too. Because I'm seeing how you approach a similar problem from different directions with different tools to achieve a similar outcome.
I got it. So I really absorbed that lesson from the physical aspect. What I think grappling, and I'm talking about it in the broadest spectrum, wrestling, sambo, judo, jiu-jitsu, whatever, just grappling. Grappling is the hardest aspect of fighting. It's the most dense, it's the most varied, it's the most chaotic, because literally everything that can happen to impact what you're doing happens in the blink of an eye, right? You're moving this and your opponent lifts his elbow slightly, boom, completely changes everything. And what makes grappling work is these basic structures, these basic principles: base, posture, pressure, grip control, head position, hip work, traction, all these things. And so once you kind of figure out this is how these things work, now you go, wait a minute, I started looking at it striking. It's like, wait a minute, it's the same stuff. Traction, base, posture, where my head is, where my hips are doing, well, wait a minute. Oh, and then it's the same with shooting, with weapons work, all that kind of stuff. I have a buddy who's a really good kickboxer, purple belt in jiu-jitsu. There's a really good kickboxer from England, from the UK. Never shot a gun his entire life. His dad was a Manchester cop, but he never grew up shooting. So he comes to the States to visit, and he's staying with me. So I'm going to take him up to the range. We go up, I bring an AR, and I bring a Glock. I give him the 10-minute safety lecture, and then I give him a couple minutes of here's basic shooting. I'm watching him shoot both of them, and you would swear he's been doing it for 10 years. He's doing everything right, especially with the AR. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's because he understands fighting. He understands what he needs to do with his body. Now he just needs to make that adjustment of bringing this tool into the body and how the body supports that structure. And then you start going past that and you're like, wait a minute, like you said, this applies to everything. Now I go, my movement. So I was a huge Filipino martial art geek in the 80s, from like 84 into the late 90s, when the combat sports sort of took over for me. But I was like into it. I had a bunch of instructor creds. I loved it. I was the biggest Filipino martial art geek and Indonesian martial art geek on the planet. Well, then once I kind of shifted over much more jiu-jitsu, savant, boxing, wrestling thing, I kind of left it aside. I think there's still good stuff, but it wasn't my thing. So flash forward. So my buddy, Larry Lindemann, who had the exact same background I had. Like, I was training with Paul Vunak, Dan Inosanto's one of his right-hand men. Larry was training directly with Inosanto. But our paths were all, like, when we first met, we're like, I can't believe we're doing the same thing. So anyway, so I got him into jiu-jitsu. He did the same thing, kind of moved, and he was Inosanto's right hand. Whenever Inosanto did the Midwest seminar tour, Larry was one of his assistants. So Larry knew this, but we go forward and he's me, and we haven't done much of the Filipino martial arts for, say, 10 plus years. So we're at the Range Master TACCON during the instructor dinner. And, this afterwards, and, some adult beverages are flowing. And somebody says something about, oh, yeah, you guys, you can't remember your Filipino stuff. And, don't challenge me on that. Don't challenge Larry. So we grabbed butter knives, and without saying a word, we didn't say, hey, let's do this. We both went into immediate flowing, but not a pattern. We're just flowing. And you would swear, because people who were watching, who knew Filipino martial arts, they were like, guys, that's like you were doing it all the time. Like you put 10 hours into that every day. And it's like, no, because we understand how to move, how to do things. And then you start applying that. Now that applies whatever physical thing I do, right? Weightlifting. I took some private lessons with a powerlifting coach. And Larry's great at that. People don't know he's got a master's degree in exercise physiology from Illinois. I can't remember, one of big university there. And he's giving me coaching on it. And as soon as he says, hey, use your hips like this, it's like, cool, I got it. I don't have to spend hours and hours of trying to figure out how to do it, because you learn how to move. And from that, like you said, you learn how to train, you learn how to practice, and now it applies to every single thing you can do. And you want to learn, if I ever decide to learn how to play the guitar, I guarantee you I'll be okay at it within a reasonable amount of time. Just because of for one thing, all things.
Well, and look at the flip side. Like, I'm sure you've had students, and I have too, that didn't have. It's like they had no kinesthetic perception. Like they'd never done anything to develop that, so they just didn't have it. They didn't know where their body was in space and how to make it assume a certain posture or fire certain muscles or do these things. And I'm not saying that, with no matter the amount of training, there's always going to be some things that are a little harder for you to make work than others. It's just going to happen, right?
Yep.
But you'll feel it when it doesn't work. If you have a significant amount of training, you'll know it's not right.
Yep. Yep. You that kinesthetic perception becomes everything.
And I would go even further. So going back to FMA, right? Going back to Filipino arts. One of the cool things I think about the Filipino martial arts is how they start with the stick.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why I think that's so cool. The tip of that stick moves so much faster than somebody's hand or foot ever will. So what it does is it gets you to build up your visual perception speed.
Yep.
And going back to shooting, I think that one of the most important things for shooting is like an action shooter, whether you're talking purely defensive or IDPA or USPSA or Steel Challenge or some mix of that, right? That ability to be very, very quick about picking up visual information is vital. And that's a trainable attribute.
Yep.
And it's a mental attribute. It has nothing to do with how clear your vision is. It's not visual acuity per se. It's a mental thing. You're speeding up your perceptual ability.
Yeah.
And that stands you in good stead in so many things, in driving, in free fall parachuting, and in shooting, in martial arts. Say you're caught in some sort of natural disaster, right? The ability to process information rapidly is a huge boon for you for survivability.
Yep.
And the only way to develop that attribute is to do something that pushes you into overspeed.
Yep.
Whether it's USPSA or, Bikini Tirsha Kali or, whatever it is, something that's making you go that fast.
Yep. You have to, we were talking about it. You have the competition that pushes those ragged edges of something. That's where you're like, okay, that's where you pick up all that stuff. You're not doing it if I shoot a match. I'm going to shoot Steel Challenge, and I'm like, okay, ready, boom, boom, boom. Okay, that's good. Technically, my mechanics are good or whatever, but I'm not pushing myself. There's no stress on that. But if I'm like, boom, 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 and I fail because I miss because I'm going too fast or whatever, okay. But you do that a few times, you're not missing when you're going that fast. And so now you can operate on that edge. That's your edge is no longer here. Your edge is now way over here. And then everything in the middle becomes like, yeah, no big deal. I got this. I'm picking this up.
Yeah. And it's that, I think, is like the main value of USPSA for real world shooting, because the pace is not going to be, an open shooter and the super squad at nationals. That's not the pace you're going to need for a gunfight. But there might be outliers where that's valuable, but for the most part, you're not going to be on that ragged edge like that, right?
Right.
But I discovered after shooting USPSA for a while that my CQB got better, and it wasn't because USPSA is tactical, because it is certainly not. Right? It's very much a game.
Right.
But the pace of shooting a stage had become my natural shooting pace. And now when I slowed it down to work with a team in the CQB environment, it was literally like I was completely relaxed. And my ability to take in all the information increased because I wasn't on the edge. Whereas if that was my max speed, if all I ever did was train CQB and that was the fastest I ever went, I would have been on red line.
Yep.
Right. Like I'm a big believer that, except for certain outliers, like unless you get like the classic Wild West, I'm standing at 7 yards, let's do quick draw, right? Unless you're in that gunfight, which is very rare, you're probably never going to need to split faster than 0.3 or 0.25. You probably should not, because you want to be under control.
Right.
Right. But if I can split at 0.18, 0.17 on demand in training, and I can push it down to under 0.15 and maybe on a good day pull out a 0.12, what is that 0.25 going to feel like to me?
Yeah.
I'm going to be completely deliberate with the sights. I'm completely deliberate with the trigger, right? It is not just comfortable. It's almost, I don't want to say lazy because that's the wrong, I'd be giving the wrong impression by saying that. So I don't want, it's not like you're holding back, but you're so far down into your comfort level that you're not going to make a mistake and you can be aware of everything else going on.
We all do this. We've all done this. Let's say you're driving cross country. You're on I go Phoenix to LA, 5.5 hour drives straight on the I-10. I'm at 80 miles an hour for 5.5 hours. You get to LA, you're on a side street somewhere and you're going 45, which is relatively fast. What does it feel like? You're like, oh my God, this is so slow. I could walk this fast, right? Because my perception for the last 5.5 hours has been geared at 80 miles an hour of everything and trying to process information. And now I'm at half that speed. Like you said, it's not lazy, but I'm not stressed. I'm like, oh yeah, whatever.
It takes no bandwidth. That's a good way to put it, I think.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Yeah. Well, my friend, we are already over an hour. We should probably, this goes so quick. Yeah.
When you start talking to people who you're sharing the interest in you and you're talking about stuff that's cool that you love to talk about, it's like, no. We just started 5 minutes ago. Your clock's wrong. Come on, it can't be this.
Well, I would love to do this again.
Sure,
I think we have a whole lot more conversation, so we should definitely do another one. Before we wrap it up, tell everybody how to get a hold of you, how to find you, your website, your social media presence, how they can get a class with you, all that good stuff.
The easiest way right now is I kind of spent the last 1.5 years not quite being public. My wife went through a health thing and where I was full-time caregiver and not being super active online. I even had to cancel seminars, but kind of back to doing things. So the best way to get a hold of me or look at me is my website is iacombatives.com. I'm trying to be pretty active in putting up information, writings, videos and stuff. And I have a YouTube channel, which is really, I got to get back to doing, but I put up a lot of free videos. I have my entire grappling of my immediate action combatives coursework, my 2.5-day coursework. The entire first day and a half is up online for free on my YouTube channel. All the technical stuff, and none of it's monetized. YouTube keeps asking me to monetize it, but I like being able to do what I want and not be beholden to anybody and just say, I put the information up that I think is valuable, not clickbait or not what I'm supposed to, because you're supposed to put content out. So my website, IA Combatives, good place to go, or on Facebook, Immediate Action Combatives, or the Instagram, Immediate Action Combatives. Again, I try to put stuff out when it's worthwhile, not just to hear me talk about how awesome I am, and I'm the coolest guy, and everything I say, you need to slavishly copy everything I do. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. But yeah, let's do this again. This was fun.
No, absolutely. I'd love to do it again. And I had a really good time talking training with you today. I think there's so much to explore here. And I really firmly believe that if people paid attention to try and be the best version of themselves they could be, that generally to me, I think is kind of the meaning of life. Like that's how you get kind of self-satisfaction and yourself and you're content with who you are, is if you're always doing that bit of work, that Kaizen, like you talked about, trying to get a little bit better at being you every day. So I love the stuff. I geek out on it.
And when you meet people who are on the same journey, it's cool, right? You're like, oh yeah, let's talk about how you got to here. And I got to here. Oh, I got to learn from you to doing that. To me, that's what, and I actually think that's what we should be spending our time in the training industry talking about. With gun side or martial arts side, we spend so much time arguing about just insipidly stupid stuff, right? You got to get pure split times. No, there'll be jailbait splits and all that. That is a dumb conversation. 9 versus 45, dumb conversation. Jiu-jitsu versus striking, dumb conversation. The conversation is, how do we train for all of it to make sense and work for all of us in the best way possible? That's where we should be talking, not, hey,
Yeah.
Cecil carries a snub-nosed revolver all the time, so therefore every human being on the planet has to carry a revolver, otherwise you're stupid. Right? You know, it's just a dumb conversation. So this is what I enjoy, like this stuff.
Oh, likewise, without a doubt. Well, like I said, I really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks for coming on. I truly appreciate it.
It's an
Hope
honor,
everybody
because you've had really kick-ass people on the show.
I'm trying. I'm working on it. I just keep asking the people that I enjoy talking to, whether I know them or not. You know what I mean?
They're all
people that I'm interested in talking to, I guess I should say.
Yeah, and it's all good conversations, except for Les. Who wants to hear from Les? I mean, come on.
Les Pepperoni. I love Les.
Pepperoni, exactly.
Yeah, the inventor of Calvin Ball.
That was I had never heard of that until that episode.
It is my single favorite shooting drill not for developing technique, but for learning to apply technique.
Yeah.
You know, like sports psychologists talk about chunking, right? How you build these chunks of skill and then you kind of assemble them like Legos, you know? Well, for putting together the Lego pieces of skill, Calvin Ball is the best way to work on that, I think. It was a brilliant invention of lessons.
I just heard it a few weeks ago on the show, and I haven't had a chance to get to the range to shoot it yet. But I'm going to, just because that's really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's a blast. And it's fun too. It's like it's like a little competitive game with your friends too, which is nice.
It's good. Like I said, every episode has been, Cliff's episode was great. Scott's, all of it's just been, even a couple of the people I don't know, like Van Letha.
Yeah, she's actually really interesting. When I first met her, I'll admit, and if she's watching the show, I've already told her this, but I'll apologize again. I had this preconceived notion that she was just kind of an influencer,
Oh, sure.
And then when I met her and realized how serious she was about training, both fitness and BJJ and shooting, and how she took it really, not just seriously, but with the right attitude, that attitude of just working on herself and getting better. I had to have her on the show. She's good people.
It was good. After the episode, I started following her on Instagram because I'm like, yeah, that's the kind of person you want to support.
All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hope you had a good time with this, and I will talk to everybody again next time.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Way is in Training. Please come back again as we explore how training makes us better at our craft and better in our everyday lives. See all of you soon.